Good afternoon. Welcome to the Indiana Clean Diesel webinar. My name is Carl Lissick of South Shore Clean Cities, and I will be your host for today's information session. The Indiana Clean Diesel Coalition's goal is to reduce diesel emissions throughout the state of Indiana. Today, our presentation will feature Mr. Shawn Seals from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, who will be providing an overview of the current 2019 Indiana Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Program. This presentation will overview round one of the VW on-road and non-road round one solicitation. This grant opportunity became available on March 25th, 2019. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the South Shore Clean Cities website. Questions will be addressed at the end of this presentation and can be entered in the text box of your screen. If you have any questions about the VW mitigation, please feel free to reach out to your local Clean Cities Coalition, who will be able to assist you with this and other questions. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Shawn Seals.
Thank you, Carl, and thanks to South Shore Clean Cities for hosting this webinar. It's important information, and we appreciate you helping us get it out. So for those that don't know already, my name is Shawn Seals. I am the Senior Environmental Manager with Indiana's Department of Environmental Management. Specifically, I work in the Office of Air Quality, and my primary work task over all these many years has been to administer clean diesel programs out of the IDEM office. So today we're here to talk about the request for proposals related to the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Program. So we're going to touch on the following items. First, we'll do a little bit on the 2019 Indiana Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Program, the round one on-road and non-road funding opportunity. We'll talk about what grant applicants are eligible. We'll also talk about eligible vehicles and equipment projects and the percentage requirements for those types of projects. We want to make sure that everybody does have that knowledge ahead of time. Then we'll move on to talk a little about what the project application, prioritization, and bit on the total for round one. So the total for round one, as you can see on this slide, is $9.83 million. $6 million of that will be for class 4 through 8 on-road vehicles, and you'll see it says excluding school buses. $1 million for non-electric. That 1.998, and then the remaining balance of 2.73 million is for non-road equipment and vehicle projects. We expect the minimum single grant award will be in the range of $50,000, and we expect the maximum single grant award will be somewhere in the range of $2 million. Applications for this program in round one are due to IDEM on Monday, June 17th of this year. And the projects are expected to be completed by December 31st of 2020. So we can now talk a little about eligible grant applicants. I think one of the things that is really, really nice about this program is that it is pretty open. So it's both open to both public and private diesel fleets. And public diesel fleets examples would include state fleets, county fleets, city, maybe municipal, school systems, and even quasi-governmental fleets are eligible for funding under the program as public diesel fleets. And private diesel fleets are also eligible for funding, and those would include single vehicle owner operators, large on-road fleets, marine and stevedore equipment at the ports, as well as switcher locomotives. Lots of opportunities for funding in this round one program. Eligible vehicles, engines, and equipment. Let's see, you'll see here that it's a pretty broad span here. Some states have focused on single types of projects here, there, and wherever. But in Indiana, one of the things that we intentionally chose to do was to make our program a broad program that gives everybody an opportunity to receive these funds or apply for these funds. So the project types would include class 4 through 8 medium duty or heavy duty trucks. Could be class 4 through 8 buses as well, whether there's school buses or transit buses or shuttle buses. Either way, all would apply, all would be eligible. Now, pre-tier 3 ferry and tugboat marine engines are eligible, as well as pre-tier 4 freight switcher locomotives. Pre-tier 3 airport ground support equipment is also eligible under the program. And if there are forklifts and port cargo handling equipment located at Indiana's ports that have a lift capacity of over 8,000 pounds, they are also eligible under the program. So now we get into really the meat of this, and that is what types of projects are covered at which level and what is expected of those projects. So we'll start with our class 4 through 8 medium duty or heavy duty trucks. First and foremost, the model years of these trucks must be 1992 through 2009. If they are repowered with non-electric, they can be repowered at a rate of 40%, so the grant program would cover 40% of that cost if they're repowered with something that is not electric. And a repower could be covered up to 75% if that repower is an electric alternative. Replacements, if it's a non-electric vehicle or equipment replacement, it would be funded at or could be funded up to 25%. If it is non-electric drayage truck, it could also be funded up to 50%. And if it actually is a total electric replacement of a class 4 through 8 medium or heavy duty, that could be funded up to 75%. And one thing that we want to kind of make clear in this webinar, and you'll see on some upcoming documents on the IDEM's VW website, is when we speak to model years, we are speaking to engine model years, because what we're really doing here is we're substituting engines more than we're substituting vehicles. So the model years, when we refer to those for the Indiana program, we're speaking to engine model years, not chassis model years. Now, our next type of project that's eligible for funding under the program are class 4 through 8 buses. As said before, those can be either school, shuttle, or transit buses. They're a little different in the model year range when the mitigation trust was written. And in this case, it's engine model year 2009 and older. There isn't that bottom floor on this one as there is in the class 4 through 8 category above. The match percentages, however, are pretty consistent. If you're looking to repower a class 4 through 8 bus of some sort, 40% could be covered if it's a non-electric repower option, and up to 75% if it's an electric repower option. But if you're looking to replace the entire bus, if you're doing it with non-electric equipment, and that would be a clean diesel or a compressed natural gas or a propane or alternative, that replacement could be covered up to 25% of that cost. But if you do it with an electric alternative, that could be covered up to 75%. So now we move on to some of our non-road options. Our pre-tier 4 freight switcher locomotives. Switcher locomotives, as you know, these are smaller than long-haul locomotives. They have to meet the definition of a switcher locomotive. They can't be retired long-haul locomotives necessarily. These pieces must operate for over 1,000 hours per year. Now, if you just want to do a repower of the switcher locomotive and you're looking at a non-electric option, the program would cover up to 40%, and if it's an electric option, would cover up to 75%. However, if you're looking for a full replacement of a switcher locomotive, once again, if it's a non-electric piece, it will be funded potentially up to 25% and potentially up to 75% if it was electric. Then we look at the pre-Tier 3 ferry and tugboat marine engines. These are similar to our locomotive options in that they must be operated at least 1,000 hours per year. And if they are repowered, they could be repowered with non-electric at a rate of 40% and electric at a rate of 75%. And then on this slide, there would be one more line that does appear to be missing. And it's the same as you see above. The replacement, if it's non-electric for the engines, would be 25%, and the replacement of the engines, well, actually, that's not the case as we think about this more, because when we're talking about replacing the engines, we are talking about repowers by the traditional definition. So the slide stays as is. EPA has recently changed the language that they use just for those that are keeping score at home, and now they refer to these programs as vehicle replacements and engine replacements. And we old schoolers still consider an engine replacement to be a repower, so that's why there's a little confusion there. This program also has a really cool opportunity that hasn't existed in a lot of the programs previously, and that is the ability to do something with pre-Tier 3 airport ground support equipment. This equipment has to also be operated over 1,000 hours per year, and if it's repowered, it must be repowered with an electric alternative, and that could be funded up to 75%. And in the replacement category also could be funded up to 75%, but once again, it needs to be all electric. And then at the Indiana ports, forklifts and cargo handling equipment with a lift capacity of over 8,000 pounds, that is operated once again over 1,000 hours per year, could be funded for a repower at 75% or a replacement at 75%. But once again, in both of those cases, the repower or the replacement has to be an all-electric alternative. And just for clarity, these all-electric requirements are driven by Appendix D2 of the National Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Consent Decree. These are not Indiana specific. These are driven by the consent decree itself. So let's talk a little bit about vehicle and equipment replacement requirements, because this is a very important component that we want to make sure that we've got straight on the front end here. If a vehicle or a piece of equipment is replaced, it must meet these examples. First, it must be the same type and similar gross vehicle weight rating or horsepower of the replaced vehicle or a piece of equipment. So that existing piece of equipment, roughly the size of that equipment and whatever that equipment is the same GVWR as the existing piece. And that's what the next bullet kind of hones in a little more. It must perform the same function as replaced vehicle and engine or equipment. It must be scrapped or rendered permanently disabled or returned to the OEM for remanufacture. And it's disabled, if you will, by drilling a hole in the engine block and cutting the frame rails of the vehicle. These are specifically identified within Appendix D2 of the Mitigation Trust as the requirements for replacement programs. And then lastly, you will need to provide evidence of appropriate disposal or scrappage. For those that have been to the Indiana VW website, you will see that there is a form there that is there solely for that purpose. What is the process from here? Well, here it is on the slide number 11. The solicitation, IDEM posted that, as you know, in the spring of 2019. Out nonetheless, and we're excited about that. So the application process is simply Indiana parties are submitting applications in accordance with the requirements and the expectations of the solicitation. there's a component within the request for proposals, that RFP, that really identifies what is expected in an application. So you'll want to make sure to refer to that. It's towards the end of the RFP itself. From the score, prioritize, and make recommendations on projects to the Volkswagen Committee. Then the Volkswagen Committee will review the IDEM recommendations and select the final awards. And then finally, once the award is out, IDEM and Volkswagen Committee will announce the formal awards, and we will begin the grant agreement process, creating that legal document that would exist between IDEM and the state and you as the applicant. We're giving you X dollars, and in return, this is the project that you will be doing. The evaluation criteria is a very important part of this overall program. It's been dramatically revised. This should give you a good idea of what the targets you should be looking at when you're considering what type of project you may or may not want to apply for. So 25 points out of the 100 total is awarded, or can be awarded up to 25 points based on the cost effectiveness of the project. And that is basically just the dollar per ton of NOx reduced. The program is primarily focused on NOx emission reductions because the consent decree, as you all recall by now, with Volkswagen and US EPA, was focused on the excess NOx emissions that these Volkswagen vehicles did put into our air. Up to 15 points can be awarded for transformational potential, and that we loosely define as the potential to prove or maximize effectiveness of newer technology. And just a quick side note that when you look at the RFP, I believe it is Appendix A, the first attachment that you will see after the RFP, kind of identifies how we will award points within each of these categories. So if you go to that section, you'll be able to drill down into that even deeper to identify what type of point possibility you have with your project. Up to 15 points can be awarded based on the project's total NOx emission reduction potential. 15 points up to can be awarded for the National Ambient Air Quality Standard sensitive areas as a percentage of current standards. This one might come across as a little confusing, but for those areas that have air quality monitors in place, they will have the opportunity to score some additional points into the current standard, up to 10 points. This is an important category for those that have heard the story. This is a really good example of a category within the evaluation criteria where you really want to tell the story of why the location and the sensitive population around your project is more program than maybe some of the others. Leveraging of resources, you can get up to 10 points for leveraging of resources. That's financial only. You'll see it says parenthetically, meaning in-kind matches are not considered. And then 5 points are eligible for entities that register with the Indiana Secretary of State and that operate vehicles and equipment in conjunction with Indiana facilities. And you'll need to include in the application package an Indiana economic impact documentation. Those things can be found on the RFP website or on the VW website as well. Up to 5 points also could be awarded to active participants in the state of Indiana, the Department of Administration, or the Indiana Department of Transportation's Minority Women Veterans Business Enterprise programs. Or in the case of a nonprofit or a local unit of government that has published guidelines that support NBE, WBE, or VBE participation. So our next slide talks a little bit about the estimated timeline, not only for this round one on-road, non-road component, but also for some of the upcoming activities for this year. So we base everything, if you will, on the clock based on the date that we posted it to the website, which was March 25th. The proposal deadline, we need to receive those applications by June 17th. So that was 12 weeks after we posted it to the website. Somewhere around July 15th, we expect to review, prioritize, and make selections. We'll then select proposals will be notified somewhere in the range of July 29th. And then we expect grant agreements should be fully executed somewhere in late August. And then, as noted before, projects are expected to be completed and fully implemented. Those that apply for round one funding, the expectation is that your project is complete by December 31, 2020. And then the other two pieces that we've added to this slide, just kind of so folks know, because some are wondering and curious, there are two other pieces that you can expect to roll out of the Indiana Volkswagen Mitigation Trust program this year. The first one that you might be seeing and hearing about will be some conversations about the light-duty electric vehicle infrastructure program. There will be conversations about that, kind of information gathering surrounding that, and that should take place in the summer of this year. And then later this year, we will have the DERA option of the Volkswagen program. That should come out in the fall of this year. And for those that may or may not remember, the DERA option was one of the options within the National Mitigation Trust that allowed us, as the beneficiary, to set aside some funds to put in with our DERA awarded funds to kind of match or overmatch that program. And the value of the DERA option for most folks is that the DERA option provides levels of flexibility for projects and fuel types and some different things that Volkswagen simply doesn't apply, because it's very explicit on what you can and cannot fund with these Volkswagen dollars. And then the last slide is just a little bit of contact information. The first link you'll go to is if you want to hit up the Indiana Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Program's website, you can find us via that link. The first time you go to that website, if you haven't been there before, it should pop up an opportunity for you to drop in your email address, and that will put you onto a mailing list. So anytime the website is updated, you will know that there has been something new put to the website. You'll see there are two email addresses here. The one in the middle that says submit grant applications. To be that email address is for primarily is just for applications. At the bottom, you'll see my name and contact information. If you have questions related to the program or questions related to much of anything else related to clean diesel across Indiana, you can contact me via that email address or that phone number. And that concludes my piece of the presentation. I'm going to pass it back over to Carl here, and he will bring us home.
Well, thank you, Shawn, for that very, very informative presentation. As you begin to click and ask your questions, just wanted to finish up. We encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions in regards to this presentation or to any of the information that was presented today. This will be placed on our website, so you'll have access to our members with over $120 million in successful grant funding. So we feel very positive that we can be a catalyst in helping you prepare your grant application. You could do it yourself, as the slide proposes, or you can take the easy way and work with South Shore Clean Cities. So as we wait for a couple questions to come in, I'm going to start off with asking a question that came to us. Shawn, can used equipment be purchased through the VW mitigation?
No, used equipment is not eligible under the program. What you'll see is that the expectation is that whatever the latest certified engine models for the equipment of the vehicles being purchased through the program is the expectation. So they must be new vehicles. So we do have a question here submitted online. Was the scrapping OEM requirement elaborated in consultation with state and federal authorities? IDEM was not a participant in the development of the mitigation trust, so we can't really speak to that. We have another question asking, do individual applications need to come from individual applicants, or can other entities coordinate applications and submit a regional proposal? There is no right or wrong answer there. We have historically received regional applications. We have also obviously received many applications that were just direct to us from a single applicant. I think the only thing that I would point out is to understand, as the RFP does reference, that there is always the possibility that an award will be partially funded. And if an award is partially funded, let us say, for example, you're a single applicant and you apply maybe to leverage the funds as best we can across the state of Indiana, we're only able to fund 2 vehicles. When it's a single applicant, that is still a reasonable and attractive program for them. When it's a regional application, and IDEM and the Volkswagen committee are looking at these and having to determine which community makes more sense, one versus the next or the other, that does complicate things. So just understand that going into any potentially regional completion deadline with municipal budget timeline, municipalities may not be able to order vehicles until the end of 2019, and the current wait time would put delivery of the vehicle potentially into early 2021. We all recognize that, and when I say we, I mean all of the folks that are engaged in Volkswagen programs across the nation. Vehicles that used to take 3 months to go from start to finish are already taking closer to 9. So we understand that there will be potential delays in there. There is flexibility. In instances, we'll do those in a case-by-case scenario, and we do always have the opportunity to do no cost amendments or for time to grant applications. So there is a little bit of flexibility there if need be. The question is, do all electric drivetrains need to be EPA or CARB verified? This is a really good question, and one that I think that will require a little bit more research. I have a vague recollection of EPA commenting that they don't certify electric vehicles. So with that in mind, I don't know that they would need to be, because I'm not entirely sure that that actually exists. If the vehicle is part of a large fleet operating in multiple states, does it need to be titled in Indiana? Yes, the existing vehicle needs to be titled in Indiana. It will need to have an Indiana registration, aka license plate, on it at the time of application, and the replacement vehicle must go into that same location and serve that same purpose. Appendix C of the request for proposals for the existing equipment or vehicles must go into, and you'll see in there is a cell in that spreadsheet that asks for the Indiana registration number, and that's basically the plate number.
We get another question, Shawn. Is there any limitations on what equipment can be added to a piece of equipment, like an end dump that potentially a vehicle replacement that had a snow plow on it? Can that be included in the total cost of the new purchase?
So an end dump that they later put a plow on?
Yes.
Okay. So the base unit is what we look at. So in a scenario like that, you're talking about an end dump truck that you later applied a snow plow to the front. Fantastic multiple use of the vehicle, but the vehicle itself is still just an end dump truck, and that is what is eligible for replacement, not the accessories that go on or that might come along with it. I see a question that says, would charging stations be covered through the grant or only electric school buses at the level identified? Charging stations covered through the grant are only electric school buses at the level identified. It is only the school buses that are covered in this instance. There was the opportunity for states to consider funding electric vehicle infrastructure for things like school buses. But since the mitigation trust, the National Mitigation Trust, did not provide equally for other alternative fuels, Indiana and the Volkswagen Committee determined that we would fund only the vehicles and focus on the vehicles themselves. Right, one question, do vehicles being replaced need to be diesel-powered vehicles? Yes, they do need to be diesel-powered equipment and vehicles.
One other question that we have, Shawn, is how long will it take for our municipality to be reimbursed if we are awarded a grant?
It's a great question, and frankly, nobody knows exactly yet. This program is very new, as everybody knows, and all of the states are now going through really that first part of this process, and that's putting their RFPs on the street, awarding programs, watching implementation of projects. Not many have really put in any reimbursement requests from the trustee. So at this point, we really don't know. What we do sense, however, is that it should be a reasonably efficient process. We haven't heard any real war stories from anyone who has put in, reimbursement requests for some smaller items. And then the next question we have is, will the light-duty EV infrastructure portion be discussed in summer, include EV charging infrastructure? Well, the light-duty EV infrastructure portion is the EV charging infrastructure. It's focused on light-duty. So if the question is, will that include any conversation related to the medium and heavy-duty aspects, the answer would be no. The conversations this summer around the light-duty EV infrastructure will be exactly that. It will be focused on the light-duty components.
We have one more question, Shawn, is what will be the reporting requirements?
The reporting requirements really fall on the shoulders of IDEM as the beneficiary. And so the expectation that we will have from those that are awarded funds will simply be to support us in whatever those reporting requirements will be. They shouldn't be too time intensive nor too labor intensive.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I wanted to thank our speaker today, Mr. Shawn Seals from IDEM, and wanted to thank you all for being present. Again, this webinar has been recorded. It will be on the South Shore Clean Cities website for further usage for you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you all for attending, and good luck.